welcome note to all of you. Prashanjit da, I request you to kindly deliver the welcome note and welcome all our guests over here. We can't hear you. Prashanjit da, we can't hear you.
Yeah. Thank you, Palashpriya, for your nice introduction. As we all know that our respected principal ma'am is away in Sundarban for some relief works organized by our college. So on behalf of principal ma'am, I welcome all the participants in the second day of this seminar. We have Dr. Goswami with us. I am not a student of economics. Still, as economics is related with all of us, so I am very much interested to know what is going to be the changes, assumptions, what are the assumptions in the economic scenario of India as well as the world in the current times and in the few coming months or years. So this is going to be a very interesting seminar, I guess. With this brief talk, I would like to request Ishita to ask Abhijit, the head of the Department of Economics, to give a brief academic description of Dr. Goswami and then start the program. Thank you, Ishita.
Thank you, Prashanjit. I would like to bring into notice that today all of you who are present in this webinar are requested to kindly note that in the comment section before the end of this session, that is maybe 15 minutes before the end of the session, we will be giving the feedback link. So kindly note the feedback link and send your valuable feedback to us. That will help us to improve our session or webinar. So kindly note the feedback link that will be given in the comment section before for 15 minutes at the end of the session. And now I would like to request our head of the department, economics, Dr. Abhijit Dash, to kindly proceed and give a brief history of Dr. Bhaskar Goswami, who is present with us.
Thank you, Palashpriya. Thank you, Chiva. Dear all participants in our there is a presentation webinar. On behalf of Economics Department, we request all of you and we are grateful that you are also participating in second day's webinar, and we have made a clear discussion on this issue. In the first day, Dr. Lahiri have discussed a clear discussion on this COVID-19 pandemic issue. And yesterday, we also sensing self-isolation and travel restrictions have led to the reduced workforce across all economic sectors and caused many jobs to be lost. And different reports we also know that revealed this type of contagions. And fears of a new recession like these call for resilient and strong leadership in healthcare, business, government, all sectors. Medium and long-term planning is to balance and adjust the economy for this crisis. So, in this respect, today Dr. Bhaskar Goswami is with us, and he will that COVID-19 taught us at economic perspective. Thank you, Dr. Goswami, that you are with us. Dr. Goswami completed his PhD from Catholic University, and presently he works as an associate professor in the Department of Economics, working University. His research interest areas are in macroeconomics, development economics, and financial economics. His works have been published in different reputed international, national, and edited volumes. We are really great. And he's also lead a membership and a good membership. The team prepared several district human development reports with Bengal. Uh, Thank you, sir. Uh, Please, you start your topic.
Thank you, Dr. Obijit Das. Good afternoon to all of you. Thank you, IQAC coordinator. But before I start, I think I'm getting a feedback sound with too many microphones on. I'm getting a feedback sound which might be an interruption on the way of my talk. So I request all the participants on behalf of the organizers to mute.
Francis, you are muted. Speaker mute করুন। প্রসেনজিৎ unmute করুন।
Okay. It's done.
No.
Thank you, Principal Ma'am in absentia, and thank you to the faculty members of Economics Department for inviting me. Thank you, Dr. Mukherjee. Thank you, IQAC Director, for those nice words. Now, let me begin my talk. But before I begin my talk on webinar, one thing I must say on a lighter note that. The good thing of a webinar is that the times are flexible. That's a very good thing. But the worst part is that you miss out the high tea and the lunches in webinar. So people like me who has a good appetite for delicious food, we definitely miss those things. Anyway, jokes apart, let's come to the serious talk. Talk on this lessons of COVID-19 that we come across. Now, in my entire talk, there would be three distinct phases of my talk. The first one would be the development, the recent development leading to this the crisis that we are facing right now, and that would be in the Indian context. And the second phase of my talk, I would be dealing with on the possible solutions, because I deliberately use the word possible because I don't know whether these are at all a foolproof solution to the crisis or not. So this might be some possible solutions to overcome the crisis situation. And the last part and the last phase of my talk, I would take up three case studies of different regions of the world. How did they combat this COVID-19 very successfully, and I'll make an attempt to draw some lessons from this successful case studies of countries fighting this crisis period very successfully. Okay, so with this structure in mind, let me move on with my talk. Let me unfold the story that I have to share with you all. The first,
Sir, have you observing your screen?
Yeah. Please, Proshinjit, please put on the slide on.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so the slide, please. The second one.
1 minute. 1 minute. So, have you got it, sir?
No, I'm still to get it.
Now?
Can all the participants see the slides? It's not a problem with me. If all the participants can see it, it's fine.
I cannot see it.
No, I think.
Yes.
Bhaskar sir, can I share a problem with you?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Actually, I think your fan is somewhere attracting the noise. Can you put your screen somewhere
Is it fine now?
I think the fan noise is catching your microphone actually.
Okay. Just a second.
Okay.
So Joydevda, what you have done is that I'm going without fan. Anyway, can you see the slide?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, it is visible.
It is clearly visible.
Yes,
It's
yes.
it's not visible from my end. Anyway, I don't know.
See it.
Pardon, sir?
I cannot see the presentation
Slide. Yeah. That's true, sir.
Ishita, can
Sir, please
you solve the problem?
Sir, please pin the
I also
presentation
can see
tab.
the presentation.
Ishita, can I say something? You will have to just change the layout and just pin the slide screen. Then it will be visible to everyone. You please change the layout. You please change the layout and pin the screens, presenting screen. Then it will be visible to everyone in the webinar, I think. Or if you individually can do that, he individually can pin the presentation screen on his personal screen, then it can be seen.
Now is it visible clearly?
No, not yet.
Dr. Proshenjit Das have two tabs. Please pin the presentation tab.
Exactly. The presentation tab has not been pinned.
There are two tabs, namely Proshenjit Das, and you pin the presentation tab. Please.
Okay.
Can you clearly see this? Is it visible?
Not yet, not
Is
yet.
it visible to everyone?
No. It's not visible. Not visible.
My suggestion is that everyone go to the chat box and find out another Proshenjit Das and click on it
There are two Proshenjit,
in the and
now
click
it's
on
visible.
the another Proshenjit Das.
Prakash
You will
Mama,
find.
please stop presenting.
Now is it visible?
Not yet, not yet.
Please go to the people icon and go there. There is another presentation slide, namely Proshenjit Das. Please pin the presentation slide.
Okay, now it's visible.
Visible? Okay.
Yeah, to me.
Okay.
I don't know about
Is
others.
it visible? Is it visible to others?
Not yet.
I think no.
Not
it
yet.
is visible.
Not yet.
What is happening? I don't know.
Please go
I
to
suggest-
the people icon. Please go to the people icon, and you see that there are two tabs, namely Proshenjit Das.
Okay, let me interrupt, Ishita. Let me interrupt. Please.
Yes,
Please let me interrupt. Meanwhile, since we are losing time, Proshenjit try to find out the slides, and I'll continue.
So,
with my
sir,
talk.
have you
It's
seen the
visible.
slide?
It's visible from my part. I don't know from from the perspective of the other participants.
It may happen due to internet connectivity also. But,
Maybe whatever. Forget it. We can.
Sir, it's not visible.
No, it's visible. The procedure said by Ishita ma'am is to be followed properly. I have followed it and I.
Kindly follow the instructions given by Ishita. Okay, Ishita, you may write in the chat box also.
Yes.
Participants, you may kindly check the chat box what Ishita is writing. Sir, you can proceed.
Okay, please go on to the second slide, please. And sorry for this interruption, dear participants. These are the technical glitches that we face in a webinar. Anyway, so let's begin my talk. Now, this present crisis that has been inflicted on us by COVID-19 is a unique and unprecedented one in the history of mankind, I must say. Now, why I say it's an unprecedented, because of three particular reasons, three precise reasons. Now, one is the present crisis is a combination of health pandemic as well as an economic crisis. Okay, so it's a combination of two factors coming into force. Now, if you consider health within quote unquote, it has a micro connotation. Okay, the health of economic agents we talk of. And if you consider the on the other hand, so what this pandemic has done, or what this COVID has done, is that it has transmitted the crisis from the micro level to a macro level. Okay, and this transmission was very fast within an economy. Okay, so that makes it very unprecedented, because prior to this crisis, if you think of any other crisis, or if you go across any other crisis that occurred in history, we don't tend to find this combination, dreadful combination, I would say, of health, of the micro as well as the macro unit taken together. So this is very interesting feature of the present crisis. That's number one. And the second is that the speed of the contagion is so fast, it's unthinkable fast, such that it spreads across the globe, any corner of the globe, within a very few time. I mean, it takes very less time to spread, and perhaps this might be accounted for the integrated world we are living in right now. So the more integrated we are living in an economic perspective, the more is the spread of this contagion, and that precisely happened in this present context. So that was the second reason why I call it an unprecedented one. And the third is here, speaking of macroeconomics, both the demand and the supply side shocks comes to play at tandem. Okay, now what do I mean by demand and supply shocks? That I think most of the participants have a background of economics. I don't need to explain in details of this particular type of shock, but nevertheless, I'll touch upon this demand and supply shocks in details in the later part of my presentation. So, given these three reasons or three features, the present crisis is unprecedented, and in the history of mankind, we haven't seen, or there is no documentation of such a crisis in the history. Okay, so next slide, please. So, speaking of the story from India, what I intend to do is that break up the entire period or the timeline starting from 215 to, let's say, 2025, and I guess 2020 is a perfect example of structural break for any empirical researcher working on economic and social sciences. So given this structural break, 2020 as a structural break. So what we intend to do is that we walk 5 years back and see how the economy was doing, the Indian economy was doing, and now we look forward to another 5 years from now on, and try to foresee what are the possible chances of the economy coming out of this crisis. So right now, I am not in a good position, or we are not in a good position to say what would happen to 5 years down the line. But nevertheless, any researchers who would be dealing with this particular issue in let's say sometime after 2025 would be in a better position to gauge all the aspects of the economy, because still there are many things unfolding now each and every day. We don't have a very overall picture of the economy right now. So that is what I intend to do. I intend to walk back 5 years, then see what was the economy. How was the economy performing in the Indian context, and given this COVID 2020 crisis, what is the likely impact in the coming days that we are going to face? So this would be the story of India. context. The next slide, please. Now there is a popular trending word in colloquial Hindi. If you are a very good observer of commentators in and chats and TV shows, the thing that we quite often hear is that a chronology samjhiye. Okay, so that's precisely what I want to do in this particular slide. Try to understand the chronology of events starting from 2015. Now, 2015 and the time around those years, the GDP, the Indian economy was doing fantastically well because the growth rate in some quarters did cross 7% mark, and by any standard, maintaining a growth rate of 7% is not it's not a matter of joke. It's a good achievement in all respect. So the Indian economy was doing fantastically well by any world standards. It was maintaining a growth rate very close to 7, and in some quarters it even overshoots 7%. So that was a good sign. The people, or the credit worthiness of India was very good, very sound and robust. But then came 2016, 8 p.m., 8 November, the famous announcement of our Prime Minister, demonetization. Now, I won't be dealing with demonetization because by this time, none of the economists can claim that there is any single benefit arising out of this demonetization. The only thing demonetization did is that it's just paralyzed the informal sector. The informal sector became credit crunch. There was a problem of liquidity. Everything was so ill-planned. In fact, this policy was a very bad choice policy. But then what has been done cannot be undone. So anyway, this demonetization was a fatal blow for the informal sector, and given post-demonetization situation, the economy started to show some signals of stress in terms of demand deficiency, because as you know, through this policy, the informal sector was badly hit. So the demand deficiency started to creep up in the Indian economy. And as if the story was unfolding of demonetization, the later came the very quick implementation of GST, which again I would say is a second blow for the informal sector, because the small and medium business houses was not prepared for GST, was not prepared for this regime shift in taxation policy. So it came very hastily, and it caught off guard the informal sector. Again, felt the heat of this GST, implementation of GST. So the things got compounded in the post-GST situation. By things, I mean the demand deficiency in the economy got compounded. And the magnitude of demand deficiency, the scale of demand deficiency was growing at a very high rate. Now, this particular time, we come across different data and statistics, which are all-time at a historically very high level. If you can recall, this is a time when we see reports of unemployment rate to be the highest one in last 45 years. The inflation rate was too high. There was rampant unemployment, lack of demand. So the things get compounded, and the complex issues of demand deficiency comes to play prior to this. So this was the event unfolding till we encountered the COVID case in January 2020. So the demand deficiency, the problem of demand deficiency continued till those periods. And when finally on March, when our Prime Minister declared a nationwide lockdown to tackle the COVID situation, we face a supply shock. So over and above a demand deficiency, now comes a supply shock. So in prior to this lockdown period, in terms of a basic macro model, what we witnessed was a downward shift of the aggregate demand curve. There was a continuous downward shift of the aggregate demand curve. Now, given the lockdown and in the post-lockdown situation, now we face yet another menace in terms of disruption in supply chains, and that's a supply shock. So now what we face right now is over and above a shift, unfavorable shift of the aggregate demand curve, the aggregate supply curves also start shifting in the backward direction, and that it's a twin problem for the economy. So the production gets hampered both from the demand side and the supply side. So this was the twin attack, the twin crisis of demand and supply that we are right now facing. Against this backdrop, our finance minister goes for a announcement of fiscal package of 20 lakh crore rupees. Now, I'm not going to the deliberation of the breakup of this 20 lakh crore rupees. I don't have any intentions for those things, but I would touch upon some few points regarding this fiscal package. Now, this fiscal package, along with this fiscal package came many announcements of opening up of the economy, reforms in defense, reforms in coal, mining, so on and so forth. I'm not against it. Let that be so, whatever the finance minister have announced. But to my point, the finance minister of our country has wrongly diagnosed the disease of the economy. In this 20 lakh crore package, the main emphasis was to give credit to the business houses, the small and medium scale enterprises, so on and so forth. But so far, nothing has been given in terms of cash transfers to the displaced workers, to the workers who have lost their job because of this lockdown. And now, in a situation where where the very term tomorrow is uncertain, we don't know what would happen tomorrow. In such an uncertain times, no business houses would come up with fresh investment proposals. No one. Even if you reduce the rate of interest to a very low level, still they would be taking loans, but they would be sitting on those credits. They won't be taking up fresh investment for the simple reason because there would be no market, because people don't have any money to buy those products. So in that sense, our finance minister was caught wrong-footed. He grossly miscalculated or misdiagnosed this situation of crisis. So that's from my take on the fiscal package that our finance minister has offered for us. Please, next slide. Next slide, please. Okay. Now, let's talk about, so this is a crisis that we are facing. Now, let's talk about the possible solutions. What would be the possible solutions of it? Now, the first, definitely, in fact, the possible solutions lie in flattening of three very crucial curves. One is the pandemic curve, the second is the economic recession curve, and finally, flattening of the financial distress curve. Let me touch one by one. What do we mean by flattening of pandemic curve? Now, as you see, in absence of any proper pharmaceutical drugs or vaccines to fight COVID, lockdown was the only option to avoid, was the only option available for the policymakers. No, there are two particular objectives of lockdown. There has to be two objectives. One is to avoid the contagious spread of this disease. That's quite obvious. And second is that in the interim lockdown period, the government is expected to bridge the gap between the targeted health infrastructure and available health infrastructure. So that was that ought to be the second objective behind any lockdown. or announced by any government. Okay. However, unfortunately, that was not the case with India. In fact, simply dropping flowers from the helicopter, or banging thalis, or lighting diyas, or for that matter, drawing circles in the streets of Calcutta did not help in improving the health infrastructure. That's very simple. We needed to improve upon our health infrastructure, the available sources on a very bare footing measure. But unfortunately, ironically, it did not happen for India. So coming to the next one, the economic recession, flattening of economic recession curve. Well, here my take is very simple. I believe in the tagline, first thing first. So you see, in our economy, the first problem did originate from the demand side. And so I feel, it's my strong opinion that I feel the solution should also start, the solution for flattening the economic recession curve should also start from the management of the demand side itself. Okay, so in that sense, what I foresee, or what I see would be a good solution to revive the economy was to boost up the aggregate demand in the economy, and that can be done through cash transfers to the workers who have lost their jobs during the lockdown period. That's number one. And the secondly, because of this lockdown, there was a scarcity of food, there was scarcity of the purchasing powers of the workers who have lost their jobs have gone dramatically taken a dip. So food transfer would also prove to be beneficial for the economy. So cash come food transfer could have been a very good solution to flatten, to address the demand deficiency part of the economy. But unfortunately, till now, for the Indian context, that did not happen. Maybe that happened in some pockets, or discreetly in here and there in different states of India, but for the entire population facing this menace, that did not happen as simply as that. Now, after addressing this demand deficiency, now we can move to the supply side and try to address the problem in the supply side of the economy. And now, as I said, our finance minister did try to address this supply side of the economy by offering a credit malak for the big corporate houses or small scale industries, so on and so forth. But just as I said, in a very pessimistic environment with uncertainty looming large, there is hardly any fresh investment proposals, because even if you offer them free credit, they are not going to make any extra bit of investments of goods and commodities, because they would rather prefer to sit idle on those credit and keep their wealth accumulation up. So in that sense, again, that would lead to widespread inequality. So on the supply side, much needed to be done through this, not through the offering of credit, but through empowering those workers who have lost their income. So that's the second part of it. And coming on the financial distress curve, now in this particular situation where there is a complete standstill of economic activity, every agents, every authorities, the revenue collection has taken a sharp hit. Be that government, be that corporate houses, be that small business houses, whatever it may be. So the revenue collections have taken a dip, and this banks and financial institutions are leveraged by the revenue collections of these business houses. So when their revenue collections take a dip, definitely a transmission channel is going to operate towards the financial institutions and the banking sector, and definitely they are going to feel the heat of this entire economic topsy-turvy situation. So that is the financial distress curve that I would like to address on. Next slide, please. So what are the tools at hand to have these solutions? The tools at hand are four. First is the health and social protection that I have just said right now. The first and foremost important should be given on the social security safety nets in terms of income to the lost workers. And this can come through the fiscal policy. Government at this point should not be worried about too much of budget deficit or fiscal deficit for that matter. They can just print money and it's a helicopter dropping as they call it. So helicopter dropping of money to the targeted beneficiaries is a call of the day. And for the monetary policies, the monetary authority need to inject liquidity in the system quite often. So these are the tools at the hand. Now, as far as holistic approach is concerned, here I take up three case studies of three regions of the world that have very successfully fought against the COVID-19 crisis. Now, the case studies that I am going to talk right now are of Vietnam. It's a small border. The first case study, it's of Vietnam. So let me take up this case study first. Then I'll come to the rest two case studies. Now, Vietnam, as you know, is a small country which has the largest sharing border with China. And China, as you know, is a ground zero of COVID-19 or the coronavirus. So till today, if you just Google, there has been no incidence of death in Vietnam due to COVID-19. And this, it's very fascinating to me, and it's very interesting. So I was looking for the reasons of it. Why did Vietnam still reports no death casualties with respect to COVID-19? The interesting thing that struck me is that the Vietnam policy of fighting COVID relied on a very simple phenomenon. The government authority, the policy dependent of the government authority was on prevention is better than cure. That's number one. And prevention is cost effective compared to cure. So this was a very simple mantra or the policy suggestion of the Vietnamese government. So what they did is was to go for the complete isolation of the country from the rest of the world, sealing the international borders. Any Vietnamese coming from abroad was mandatory, kept for 14 and 21 days quarantine period, complete isolation, so on and so forth. So through this phase of disciplined lockdown, they could maintain or they could successfully combat the COVID-19 virus. And I was wondering that how come the other countries did not successfully implement this lockdown, whereas Vietnam stands out to be an exceptional case. Now, the interesting fact that came to my mind is that look, Vietnam has a long legacy of being invaded by foreign attackers. So when this COVID-19 surfaced out in the global scenario, the Vietnamese government gave a slogan that fighting COVID is fighting our enemy. So given this cultural legacy of fighting an enemy over the past few years or decades, so they managed to keep this COVID-19 virus not entering the country, and even it had entered, there was no casualty arising out of this COVID-19. So that was a very successful story of Vietnam. Now let's move on to the next case study, and that is of Cuba. Now Cuba, it's a very small country that has faced sanctions from America, the rest of the world, most of the times, but still very peculiarly that stands on its own feet. And this particular country is a centrally planned state-owned economy, and it has, I tell you, it has the best health indicators infrastructure in the world. And the Human Development Index of Cuba is 0.778. It's by any standard, it's very impressive. So the country Cuba had this whole lot of health infrastructure. In fact, I'm told I was reading a report on Cuba. The number of doctors serving per thousand of population is maximum in Cuba compared to the rest of the world. It's very impressive. It's so impressive that at one point of time,
Ishita, what happened?
Hello?
Yes, we have lost Dr. Goswami's contact here. Connection is lost. Please call Dr. Goswami. Make a call. Probably he is not aware of it.
Okay. Prashanjita, Sir is coming. Actually, current there was a current off, so the connection is lost.
Yeah.
He's coming.
Okay. So you have to wait for some more time. Okay.
extremely sorry for the interruption, just because I'm facing a sudden power cut, so that got interrupted. Anyway, let me come back to the case of Cuba. So as I'm telling, the Cuba has a, please mute your microphone, whoever is microphone is on. Okay, so Cuba has one of as a country that can boast of very good health related infrastructure, and the infrastructure was so impressive that at some point of time the Cuban government could deploy some 50 to 100 doctor professionals to the worst heated part of Italy as a mark of brotherhood. So that was a very successful story of Cuba. Now, the third case study that I have to offer for you is a small state of India, that's Kerala. Again, the HDI of Kerala is 0.779. It's highest among the all Indian states. And you know, Kerala has a legacy of putting higher priority to health and education. And once the government allocation on health and education is very it's quite high, and the dividends of those spending comes to show up in the long run, and especially in times of crisis. So these are the three case studies of three different regions that have successfully fought in the COVID-19 crisis. And one common thing of all the three case studies is that all these three regions have a government with a communist socialist ideology and philosophy. So that's very interesting. Can I move on to the next slide, please? Can I move on to the next slide, please? Okay. So that's the holistic approach that I was talking of. Now let's try to bring out the lessons from this case study. The lessons that there are two broad lessons from this case study, I would say. The first lesson is that the countries that are governed by the socialist and the communist mindset of government did actually fare very well to combat the crisis. That's number one. And number two, you see, when the going is good, at good times, we claim for a laissez-faire economy. Everyone claims for it. We want minimum government intervention in the economic activity. But at the worst of the times, we definitely want a proactive role of the government. So that is what I would say the lesson that we can infer from this case studies. And particularly so, I would end up with this last slide where you can find that it's an expert from Financial Times UK published. It's an editorial expert of Financial Times UK published in May 9 to 2020. I leave it up to the participants to read that particular slide. And this particular report or the editorial comment came against the backdrop that when the UK government declared a crisis, declared a lockdown, all the workers who were displaced, who lost their jobs, they were given compensation through, and this compensation bill was met out from the government exchequer. And that's very. So you see, in a mature capitalist economy like UK, the government also comes to rescue. And this has been the case in the past also. For example, during the subprime crisis of 2007, where the Lehman Brothers and the big guns and the big business tycoons were going for bankruptcy, everyone expected the government would come to bail them out. And government bailing is nothing but bailing it from the taxpayers' money. So there is nothing wrong in it. So what I see is that when during good times, most of us, we say that government intervention in the economic activity is not needed, it's not wanted. Invisible hand is sufficient because that's sufficient and the animal spirit is sufficient. But at time of crisis, when the things are going tough, everyone wants, the same set of people wants government to play a more proactive role to rescue the economy, to pull the economy out of the crisis. So that offers a dichotomy as far as the government role is concerned. So that is the lesson number two. So with these few words, I like to end, and I'll leave the last slide for the participants to read it out of their own, and I'm open for any questions. Thank you.
Participants, thank you, sir, for such a wonderful, nice, informative speech, and we came to learn a lot of things from your speech. And now I would like to request the participants, if you have any question, the floor is on and you can go ahead with your question one by one.
Bhaskar sir, can you hear me?
Jodhada, please go ahead.
Sir, very, very informative and nice presentations, and I have enriched myself with all of your case studies. I must go through all those cases in internet to look more elaborative concepts regarding how to combat this kind of COVID pandemic socially and economically. My suggestion, my question to you is that you have said that we should start flattening the economic curve by concentrating first of all on demand side of the economy, and for that we can go through the direct cash transfer or through food transfer. But don't you think if we follow these cash transfer things, especially to the marginalized and distressed sections especially the migrated labor who have lost their job and they immediately need money at hand to feed themselves and their families. Don't you think that if such cash transfer can motivate them to purchase things which are not essentially important to maintain livelihood, rather they can misuse the money?
Okay, I got your question. I got your question. My simple answer is that just because there would be some 5% deviation from what is expected, it's not wise to abandon the policy at all. Even if there is a 5% deviation of wrongly using the fund transfers, cash transfers, still the 95%, the rest 95% of beneficiaries stands to benefit out of this cash transfers. And by majority, I think we should look at this 95% and not focus on this 9%. I think you got my answer.
Exactly. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Nice presentation once again.
Thank you.
Hello.
Thank you, Jyotish.
Hello. Can I ask a question?
Sure. Please go ahead.
Thank you for your nice presentation. I just want to know, you see that a lot of people are working in the informal sector, in our country particular, 90%
Right.
almost. Okay.
Right.
So is a draconian lockdown and very unfair lockdown without giving time to the migrant workers to move their own home or residence, and that creates a lot of problem. The thing is that everybody, right from Amartya Sen, Vijaygarh Banerjee, former governor of Rajam of RBI, everybody, as you have already spoken in your speech, that cash transfer was badly needed incentive for our economy to mitigate the COVID-19 pandemic economic situation. But unfortunately, very unfortunately, government had not done in this yet, and only the 500 rupees so far I have read from the paper in the Jan Dhan account only. So thing is that in one way you are talking about Atmanirbharta, and the other way you are not giving money to the poor marginalized section of the population of our country to have demand. The simple logic to my mind is that if we could give cash transfers to the marginalized people in our country who are getting mostly affected in the lockdown period, so we could generate demand in a huge scale, and that demand could be made only by the local markets, because they are not purchasers of the imported goods. As you know, they are the second category of people living in your country, apart from this big one, or rich one, who are dependent mostly on the imported articles, goods. So that is to my mind that would be the actual economic policy that should have been taken by the central government to combat the economic crisis in our situation, and we can flatten our recession curve very easily during the last 3 or 4 months, and we could hope for a better India. Isn't it?
Thank you for your observation, but I did not get your question yet. What was your question?
Well, actually, the thing is that government should do in that way, particularly focusing on the informal sector, because they are badly hit.
Okay, I got it. So you are supplementing what I have already talked about.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So may I ask you a question? Am I audible?
Sure, ma'am. Sure, ma'am. Please go ahead.
Okay. Sir, my question is that in terms of corporate loans, do you think, or what is your suggestion that corporate loans, actually, these are also expected to be affected on account of the cash flow squeeze faced by them, and the ability to refinance may be crucial, actually, or it should affect the segmental asset quality. Then if this is true, then what will be your suggestions?
Just a second, ma'am. Let me, sorry for cutting you short. Are you talking of corporate loan or credit?
Corporate credit. I'm sorry, corporate credit.
Okay.
That means, say, non-banking finance, NBFC finance,
I got it.
Yeah.
Okay. A simple logic of what I understand of a little bit of finance and macroeconomics is that in uncertain times, even if you give free credit to the investors, to the investment houses, they would be sitting up on those credits. They won't be making any fresh investment just because there is no demand in the economy.
Exactly.
And since over the past few years, because of this deficiency of demand has led to accumulation of inventories, so that would be another cause why they won't be going for fresh investment proposals. So that's my take. So the entire proposal of giving investment credit to the corporate houses is a mismatch, I would say, right at this moment. It's not. It was not needed. It's not wanted. Right. Thank you.
Just
Thank
one
you.
notification once again. The feedback link is given in the comment section.
Can I ask
Please-
a question?
Sure, sure.
Bhaskar, very beautiful presentation. Thank you. This is Ayanangshu.
Ananshu, please go ahead. How are you?
I'm fine. Very
Okay,
beautiful
please.
presentation. Very informative. Thank you. My question is, I fully agree that there should be cash transfer. But what should be the methodology? How to identify who are the marginalized?
Okay.
Country with 130 crore people.
Please, I got you. I got your question. Okay, because of the shortage time constraint, and I could not get into this modus operandi of cash transfer. But I do have a definite proposal. I don't know if anyone close to the government circle is hearing to it or not. Anyway, so the first is this cash transfers. The modus operandi would be through the principle of exclusions. Okay, the first phase of exclusion would be those salaried classes who file their returns, income tax returns. Exclude them from the list. The second exclusion list would be of the corporate individuals who file their corporate returns. So exclude them from the list. The third exclusion list would be the people who are paying GST. Exclude them from the list. And what is left, the non-taxed, non-salaried individuals who would be by and large these daily wage workers, the informal sector workers, you have their other account. Okay, so you have an other account, you have a Jan Dhan account linked with that other account. So starting a pilot project of transferring cash to these direct beneficiaries, I don't think would be a problem for the government. The only problem for the government right now is the intention of fund transfers. That's my take. I think I did make myself clear on an issue.
Yes. Thank you. That is a unique solution you've given. Thank you for the answer.
Thank you.
Any
Hello,
further
sir.
question?
Vipulda, I hope
Hello,
so. Please go ahead.
Sir, I'm Vipul.
Please.
Actually, very nice presentation.
Thank you.
And thought-provoking too. You talked about the demand shock.
Right.
And you talked about the demand shock. And very interestingly, you talked about all the possible solutions. So actually, sir, I want to listen from you, your suggestion, about the migrant laborers, and some states are now violating the labor laws.
Right.
So that's the problem. So local labor market actually crashed. We noticed that instance recently. So how do you think, sir? In one hand, you have the demand shock, and you have the migrant labor force and the local laborers. So how do you?
Okay, I got your question. First, let me tell you that there was not a demand shock. There was an evolution of demand deficiency. Rather, there was a supply shock when the lockdown was announced. So technically, if we speak of demand shock, we are not correct. So we had a period of demand deficiency from the post-demonization period, and after the announcement of lockdown, we have a supply shock. Okay, now coming to the plight of the migrant workers, what I see is that there has been a complete mismanagement of the entire issue. I would admit.
Right.
Everyone admits of it. Okay, there was no planning. Even the government don't have any data or don't have any idea that in and around Delhi and Noida, there are lakhs and millions of migrant workers from Bihar, Jharkhand, and Bengal. What would happen to them? No one even care to think of. Even in fact, what comes to my mind is that was not there, simply not there in the mind of the policymakers. And when it surfaced out, when the problem surfaced out, the government had no solution how to tackle it. So that was a complete mismanagement. Now, what I see, what I would suggest is that this can be this crisis of migrant laborers can be potentially gainful for the states they're coming back, for the home states they're coming back. Because let me give some examples. All the laborers that have migrated from Bengal to, let's say, Kerala, this rural migration from one state to another, interstate migration, was just because of job opportunity, just because of wage differential. It's a classical Harris-Stoddard model sort of migration that we have witnessed in the Indian context. And now, given this COVID crisis, we see a reverse pattern of migration, and that is a distress migration. So this distress reverse pattern of migration can be fruitfully used by the respective states, the home states, because they are very skilled laborers working in the informal sector. So if the West Bengal government takes up the policy to retrain these displaced migrant laborers in our state itself, we stand to benefit as a citizens, as a residents of West Bengal state. So that can be this crisis can be transformed to a very good opportunity of in coming days, in terms of flourishing of industry, in terms of a whole lot of economic activity. But again, I would say that depends on the good within quote unquote intentions of the government. As of now, what I see is that the migrant workers are nothing but a soccer ball kicked from one side by the central government and kicked from the other side by the state government. They have no way to go apart from some NGOs and some organization taking care of them. So it's a pathetic side, I do admit, but then given the intentions of the government, they can be very, very fruitfully used for the benefits of the economy. That's it.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for your presentation without having any fan or AC. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Any question? Any more question?
Hello, Dr. Ishita. I have a question for Bhaskar, sir.
Please go on. Please.
Sir, you have been talking about the demand, Apple and the supply shock and all. Sir, is it in terms of goods only, or is it also in terms of... Hello?
Please.
Hello, Bhaskar, sir.
Please, I can hear you.
Sir, my question was regarding the demand and... Yes, sir. Sir, regarding the demand and supply, sir, is it just about the goods that you were speaking about, or as I think Dr. Vipul sir had also told the same thing regarding the labor market. So when we speak in terms of the migrants, it's actually the labor demand and the labor supply that will also be hugely affected in the present scenario. Sir, how do you see the economic indicators? What might be the economic theoretical implications when we look at the labor market, sir? Because along with the...
Okay. I got your question.
Thank you, sir.
I got your question, and here is my answer for you. Well, look, in the Indian context, particularly in the informal sector, the labor market does not operate through conventional labor demand and labor supply curve. It's the Indian labor market, particularly the informal market, is highly imperfect. So if you think that the labor demand would equate the labor supply at a wage rate and everything would be fine, so that would be a textbook fallacy. So that in ground reality, that does not operate in the informal labor market. So what operates in the informal labor market is that instead of demand for labor matching with the supply of labor, here we have a very important concept of such employment. The employees search for employers whom they can pay low and at the same time they are very efficient, they would be very trustful to their sectors, they would be so on and so forth. So the conventional demand supply apparatus in the informal labor market do not hold in the Indian context. So
Actually,
that's the
sir,
reason.
why I asked you, because retrenchment is the new norm of the day, and not only,
Pardon?
sir, retrenchment of the workers,
Right,
sir.
right,
And
right,
not only that, yesterday when I was just looking at my district magistrate's take on the 20,000 crore big fiasco, I should say, or I don't know what, because for me it is really not crumbling down to the people. So the district magistrate of my district said that she was very happy with that particular proposal. But when the reporter asked her, okay, ma'am, you're talking about MSME sectors and investment and things like that, credit and facility. So how many people have actually taken the facility? She said zero. So finally, when it came down to our district level, so sir, this was the most like I should say, are we really getting what we are actually being promised, or is it actually going to the people? So sir,
No.
what would be your suggestion? Because even if the macroeconomic fails in this way, and even if the microeconomic theory also we fail on this front, but still it's an issue that needs to be addressed as soon as possible, sir.
Well, I don't have any ready-made to answer to your question. Let me admit it very honestly, because as things are unfolding in terms of government intervention in our economy, nothing is looking better. So we have a very gloomy picture right now. What we needed was a direct cash food transfer. Instead of that, we are witnessing a transfer of credit to the business houses, which at this particular point of time was not needed, not wanted. But see, we live in a democracy. We have to abide by what the government has to give us. We can simply register our protest, and that's all we can do for this moment. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I have a question.
Dibendu, please.
Yeah, Dibendu, yeah. Actually, you have given argument in favor of cash transfer. I have also the same opinion, but I have listened that some economists are giving a different document, different opinion like this. This cash transfer is not going to increase permanent income, and we all know, according to permanent income hypothesis, that temporary income will not increase consumption level permanently. Only permanent increase in permanent income will increase consumption. So, in fact, government should not give such cash transfer, as it is not going to increase consumption or aggregate demand. Now, how to reconcile these two types of states?
Right. I got your question. No, there has been some argument against cash transfers that precisely relied on what you just said. Well, cash transfer by none of the economists, whoever is advocating for cash transfers, are telling it that this process of cash transfers should be carried on indefinitely. Okay. I also don't subscribe to the view that there should be an indefinite cash transfers to the workers. What we are saying, or the most of the economists are saying, is that at this time of crisis, when there is no job in the market, when the workers have no income, especially the workers from the informal sector, within this gestation or the interim period, whatever you call it, there should be a fund transfer. And when the economy is back to the normal situation, then this cash transfers can be done away with. So it's not an indefinite period cash transfer. It's a cash transfer to tide over the crisis period. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, it should be a temporary phenomenon.
Definitely, because if you go for this cash transfers for indefinite time, that would be a disincentive for work. Okay, so no one want it. So just because there is no opportunity to work, the entire economy is standstill. So for this gestation period or the interim period, there should be some kind of cash as well as food transfer.
But even for the short run, don't you think that this type of strategy is going against the permanent income hypothesis? Even for the temporary income is increasing consumption and aggregate demand, then that hypothesis is not true, at least for this time period.
No, whatever you are telling of permanent income hypothesis, we have two components. One is the transitory income and one is the permanent income. Okay. Now, this cash transfers, if you think it as a permanent income, then the problem comes up. Okay, I'm not talking of cash transfer at permanent. If it is a transitory, if it is a transitory income, then I think we need to have a relook at the permanent income hypothesis, because here the transitory income do definitely improves upon
increasing the aggregate
private
demand.
consumption. Right.
Yes,
rightly pointed out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello.
Sure.
Any more?
Is it audible?
Please. Saroda Prasad.
হ্যাঁ ভালো আছিস?
হ্যাঁ ভালো আছি।
A very simple question. Do you think that this pandemic and the last 3 months, whatever we witnessed, this indicates the crisis of capitalism once again?
No.
Very simply. It will be detailed discussed later on, but simply you refer the few case studies. So I just ask you a very simple question.
Just I have touched upon it very briefly, okay, without going into details of capitalism and the crony part of the capitalism.
Right.
What I have said is that, well, when there is a good time, when the economy is flourishing, the lobbyists prefer least government intervention, okay, because if in good times, if the government comes with more intervention, then it's most likely the government would raise their taxes, corporate taxes, would put a ceiling on the wealth accumulation, so on and so forth. So during good times, no one wants government intervention, okay. So when capitalism is flourishing, government intervention is minimal. Okay. Now, when capitalism takes a back heat, when the heat is on the capitalism, you start with Lehman Brothers going for bankruptcy or for recent crisis. It's that particular time that you really want the government to have very active role in the economy. So that's a very dichotomy. That's a very fallacy, that double standard, I would say, that I personally observe in terms of the working of the political economy of the globe. So let that be whatever it is, but let's not forget that the government has a very important role to play. That's a major lesson that I would say. That's it.
Thank you. It's a nice presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further question? Can we close the question answer session right now? Bhaskar sir, can we close the question answer?
Sure. It's up to the organizers. Whatever the organizers feel they can do.
Okay. If there is no more question, then we would like to close the question answer session here. And I would like to request Ishita to kindly give the vote of thanks, since Principal Madam is not with us right now online. So I would like to request Dr. Ishita Mukherjee of Department of Economics to kindly give the vote of thanks. And before she gives, I would once again like to remind you that the feedback form link is in the comment section. Kindly note the feedback form link and kindly send your valuable feedback to us, and we will be sending you certificates by the end of this month. Thank you. Ishita, please continue.
Thank you, Palashpriya. Honorable speakers and all participants, it's my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks of this occasion. I, on behalf of Department of Economics, Vijaygarh Jyotish Ray College, extend a very hearty vote of thanks to the honorable speakers of this 2 days event, Professor Shajul Lahiri and Dr. Bhaskar Goswami, who blessed us with their presence and took out valuable time for us. Thank you, sir. I am grateful to our principal madam, Dr. Rajashree Nyogi, for giving us an opportunity to organize the event and providing encouragement and support. I wish to express my heartfelt gratitude to our IQAC coordinator, Dr. Prashanjit Dash, HOD of Department of Microbiology, as he is the backbone of these two events. Uh, now, as the program can become successful with a single person, so I like to thank our beloved head of the department, Dr. Abhijit Dash, for his guidance and moral support. I would like to thank my senior, Dr. Polashpriya Haldar, for her great efforts to make this event successful. She was with me from the beginning. I like to thank my some colleagues of Vijaygarh Jyotish Ray College who inspire us and give the moral support to do this event. Lastly, a big thanks to all of the participants for their active participation in this event, which make this event successful. Thank you so much, and hope we will present another event to you near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ishita. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. So we declare it to be the end of today's session. It was a wonderful session, and we learned a lot from you, sir. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
And
Thank
hope
you.
to meet you all in near future.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'm signing out. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Yes, sir. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. And thank you all participants. Thank you so much.